Federal Appeals Court in Washington has rejected Donald Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution on charges he sought to overturn the 2020 election. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit dismissed Trump's argument that he cannot be prosecuted for actions taken while serving in the nation's highest office. Special counsel Jack Smith says the former president's acts were criminal and could not be covered by presidential immunity. Last year, as you might remember, a federal grand jury indicted Trump on charges stemming from his alleged efforts to remain in power after losing the 2020 election. The former president has denied any wrongdoing. Scott MacFarlane, Katrina Kaufman, and David Becker are all with us right now. Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Katrina is an attorney and CBS News campaign reporter. And David is a CBS News election law contributor. Scott, let's start with you. What did this ruling actually say? Walk us through the wording.
Yeah, Lilia, this is a unanimous, unambiguous, and emphatic ruling from 3 judges on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. The more practical implications is this raises the specter, if not the likelihood, Donald Trump's trial date goes back on the calendar in a matter of months. It could happen this spring. In the broader sense, what the court ruled was that Trump's argument of presidential immunity, that he can't be prosecuted for election subversion because he was the president undertaking what he believed to be official acts, was a dangerous idea, that it would collapse our system of government and neutralize the balance of power in our government, and is just untenable, according to these 3 judges. They had a fundamental disagreement with his argument. They weren't picking apart little pieces of minutia or pulling at threads. They just slammed back the entirety of Donald Trump's presidential immunity argument. And what they've also done, again in a practical sense, is given Donald Trump until Monday to make an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Notwithstanding that, this case returns where it began, with U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, the same judge who made a similar argument when she knocked down the presidential immunity claim that Donald Trump is just a criminal defendant, no better, no worse than any other, and does not deserve special privileges.
Now, Katrina, I'm curious, is there any impact of this ruling on the former president's actual defense in the criminal case?
Sure. I mean, basically, it knocks out his ability to get rid of this case. As we can see, he was trying to say that he was just completely immune from these charges. But as Scott said, this court says that we have a separation of powers in the United States, and the president is not above the law. And, the court found that the executive branch's interest in upholding presidential elections, investing power in a new president under the Constitution, and democratically selecting the president just countervailed these arguments that he was making. So basically, it just means he's going to have to face these charges from Jack Smith.
Yeah. I mean, there's one more possibility here, which is the Supreme Court. Several of the judges appointed by former President Donald Trump. I want to bring in David. David, talk to us about what likelihood there is that the court would take this case, and what would that ruling have on the whole election process in America?
Yeah, well, I think there's a near certainty that Trump's attorneys will petition the Supreme Court to take this case. But this is discretionary for the Supreme Court, and they take very few of the cases that come to them. And they've already got a very big case being argued this week in the Supreme Court on Thursday about Donald Trump's qualifications to serve as president, having, as per the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State, engaged in an insurrection. So the question is the Supreme Court going to want to take on this very comprehensive, very strong ruling and add to their docket of issues that might affect the election? I think, given the strength of this opinion, given the fact that it is from 3 judges appointed by 3 different presidents, unanimously per curiam, as they call it, I think it's probably likely the Supreme Court will act very quickly to not take this case. And that will, as Scott said, put this very much back on track for a trial in the spring or perhaps at the latest early summer.
And Katrina, what would that, I mean, if the immunity question is off the table, what impact would that have on the many other cases he's facing?
Sure. I mean, it means D.C. can move forward. It also means Florida can move forward, of course, because that's also a federal case. In terms of Georgia, because that's a state case, it doesn't actually impact that. I mean, President Trump is trying to say that because of the supremacy clause that he shouldn't be able to be criminal prosecuted in the state, but this ruling won't actually technically have an impact on that.
I see. And Scott, I mean, this is the leading candidate for the GOP. What impact does this have on the campaign, on Trump as a candidate?
There's a real practical impact on the campaign. We'll leave aside whether this costs or helps him draw more political support, because that's seemed to be bulletproof so far. But in a practical sense, Lilia, this case goes back on the calendar for, let's say, April 2024, 2 months from now. Donald Trump can't just pop in and pop out and come and go as he pleases. He's a federal criminal defendant. He has to be in the courtroom every day. And this is not one of those quick trials that starts and ends in the same week. This is going to take up to 2 months. Extended arguments, profound moments, the possibility of a spectacle in the courtroom. Donald Trump has to be there from soup to nuts, beginning to end. That certainly impacts his ability to go out and campaign. And it may turn the courthouse steps, the area around this courthouse, into his platform for re-election. And as a reminder, and I always like to say this in case folks forget, no cameras allowed in federal courts. This would be something that sketch artists and reporters like us would detail to folks outside.
Good point there, because it has been the case that campaigning in the court seems to favor the campaign. Scott, Katrina, David, thank you all. Thanks for being here.